Hello, this is episode 6 of the Education Consultant Marketing Podcast.
This is Education Consultant Marketing. The presenter is Andrew Hall. Andrew Hall. An audio download for education consultants and trainers who want to grow their business, support more schools, and better serve their specialist learning communities.
So, whether you're a full-time consultant, a part-time trainer, or a teacher wanting to share your passion with an online community, then this is the marketing program for you.
You're listening to Education Consultant Marketing with Andrew Hall.
I'm Andrew Hall, teacher and head teacher for over 25 years, and now an education consultant and trainer. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about creating outstanding training sessions, what we can learn about marketing from my logman, and how to fill your website with great content.
You're listening to Education Consultant Marketing with Andrew Hall.
So let's get going straight away. This is the Education Consultant Marketing Podcast, and it's pretty much the only place in the UK where you'll get information dedicated to helping education professionals grow their business. Now, in the programme today, we're going to just start off thinking about how your training sessions can be outstanding. Now, I don't know if you use Twitter, but I use Twitter quite a lot for professional purposes, and you can follow me on there at Consultant Head on Twitter. But there was a Twitter thread this week which was really quite irritable, and I absolutely agreed with them. What happened was someone went on to some training this week, and when she came back, she tweeted that it had been incredibly boring, and there'd been a whole, I think she said something like 55 slides, 41 of which were just read out to the audience. And there wasn't any interaction with the audience whatsoever. It was just a straight lecture for probably 4 hours. And nobody wants that. The problem for education consultants and trainers working with schools and teachers is this, that pretty much everybody in the room can do a presentation, and you have to be able to do a presentation better than 90% of them. Most teachers sitting in training will be thinking, do you know what, I could do that. And in most cases, they absolutely could. And they would knock you hands down doing it. In schools, we've got so many outstanding teachers now that we really, really have to up our game if we're trainers. Because at the end, instead of them thinking, oh, I could do that, what we want them to think is, oh, do you know what? I wish I could do that. And you need to be putting on such a terrific display that most people there are really standing thinking, oh, do you know, I would so love to be able to do that. So we need to be able to use a lot of techniques in our training that would be very familiar to outstanding teachers. So if you're not an outstanding teacher, you're not a good teacher, you're going to have to work really, really hard at being better than most of your audience. The first thing that I absolutely would like to make sure that people are doing, it's a tremendous passion of mine, as it is for several other people I know, is if you're using PowerPoint, then for goodness sake, do not put pages and pages and pages of writing into it and then read it out. That's the top no-no, isn't it? So what you want with your slides are, you want them to have some impact. And the more visual you can make them, the better. And I don't mean sort of horrible looking clip art from the 90s. I mean properly put together slides. If you can't do it yourself, there are loads and loads of people who can help you with that. But one of the key things is to have a nice big image. Is one way of looking at it, and then just putting 1 or 2 words on there. Now, some of you are going to say to me, well, yeah, but the training I do, people really do have to know the detail. Well, the problem is, if you're just putting a slide there, and then you're going to read all the words, because most people in the audience can't see it, they are going to get bored, and you don't want bored people, because bored people switch off. So what I try to do is choose one big image, and then I overlay it with some words, or else I just have the image in half the slide. Now, years ago, there was an interesting trick. This was before PowerPoint, and when slides were being used to give presentations and talks. And I went to a talk about epilepsy given by an international neurologist. And what was really interesting He did 2 sets of slides. On the one half of the screen, he gave all the medical information, and on the other half of the slides, he showed slides of his holiday to Cornwall. And I thought it was absolutely brilliant because he just opened up and he said, I know there's a very mixed audience in here. Some of you are consultant neurologists like myself, but some people I know are lay people. So if at any time my slides get too technical, there'll be slides for different audiences, but some of the slides will be very technical and will be aimed at consultant neurologists. And there'll be other slides which will help us understand epilepsy to lay people. But the other part, if you're ever bored, just look at the other slides of my holidays. I thought that was a really interesting way to split his screen. You might not want to do that, but on the other hand, maybe you do need a sort of dual approach to being able to share information, particularly if you're working with an audience who have got quite a range of experiences. Now, my main bugbear with PowerPoint is that for many trainers, many consultants forget that they're communicating with an audience and that part of that process is maybe using some slides or some images. The PowerPoint itself is not your presentation. I'll say that again. The PowerPoint is not your presentation. You are your presentation. And what people want you to do is interpret what the information is in a way that is easily digestible for them. So you're not going to sit there and read anything out. That is just the kiss of death for your presentation. You need to be the centre of your presentation. The slides need to support what you're talking about. Now, I want you to do 2 things and look at them critically. The first is to just watch the BBC News, particularly the 24-hour news, and just see how they use images there to support the message. They're not writing out the person's script, putting it on a slide and then showing that on the television, are they? They're using some graphics or they're using a few words which will just demonstrate the point that's been made. So the visuals support what's been said. The other place you can go and see truly wonderful presentations are the TED Talks. That's TED Talks. If you put that into your search engine, you'll get to TED Talks. And just watch a few of those and see how the images, see how the short videos really enhance what those people have got to say. So that's the PowerPoint slides. Please make sure that they're not detracting from your message. They're part of your presentation and they're supporting what you're saying, but they're not the be-all and end-all of your presentation. In fact, something happened to me just yesterday. I did have some slides to illustrate some points that I was making in a talk. But actually what happened was there was a problem with the projector and we couldn't project the images. But I was able to carry on with the talk without any problem. And that's because I knew my material and I knew that it would stand alone without having the images. So if you're not able to do that, then you really do need to think again about the communication strategies that you're using whilst you're doing your talk. Now, the other thing that you need to think about is during your presentation, during your training session, what are the people going to do? And what different senses is that going to address? Because if you just concentrate on one sense, just the visual, then again, you're not going to stimulate people enough to stay awake and stay with you during your material. So think about using images, obviously on the slides, but you might use music to separate different elements of your presentation. You can use video, and also don't forget you can use props. You can use objects and things to illustrate your talk. Now, for most of us in education, at some point, if not very regularly, we'll have done assemblies. Now think about those assemblies when you're training. You're going to use some objects as well. You're going to use some different ways of using your different senses. The other thing you can do as well is to use the sense of smell. Now, I happen to live in a town where, and I'm not joking, there is a smell factory. There is a factory here which makes the smells that go into shops and perfumes and things like that. So sometimes the town smells of custard. Sometimes, I'm not joking, this is absolutely true. The town smells of custard, or it smells of cleaning products, detergents, things like that. On another day, it can smell like coffee or donuts, because they make the smells that go into supermarkets to just enhance the bread baking smell. There is a company who makes a wide range of smells, and you can use these in your presentations as well, just to enhance what it is that you're doing. The web addresses for that are on the show notes. Show notes for today are www.educationconsultantmarketing.com/6. Once you've got your presentation under control, your PowerPoint slides are there to support it, you've added in some props perhaps, or some little pieces of video, then you also want to add in some activities. And the best activities are discussion starters, but don't just leave people with one question. So you can give them some random cards, for example, with different phrases on, which will start them thinking. You can do a sorting exercise to rank things in a particular order. You can ask people to make some sort of post-it hierarchy and juggle it about. Think about what the activities are. Now, my slogan used to be, you are never more than 20 minutes away from an activity, because what you need to be doing is flagging up things that are going to be coming up over the next little while, so that people aren't getting too bored and they're not waiting for too long for something else to come up. I always start from the premise that this might be called training, but actually it's performance. It's a performance by me for other people. And so you need to bring into it some colour, some contrast and some pace, so that people aren't bored by any kind of monotone thinking from you. So do yourselves a favour. Most importantly, do your customers, clients and listeners a favour, and give it a little bit of punch and a little bit of interest, and don't rely on PowerPoint.
You're listening to Education Consultant Marketing with Andrew Hall.
Now, just a thought about marketing. Last week, I had some logs delivered to my house, which is not an unusual thing during the winter. Probably have 4 or 5 different loads of logs. And a guy comes along. He comes in a Luton van, which is really nice. It covers up the logs from the rain, so they're still dry, even if he's delivering on a very wet day. My log man sort of reverses it right up to the place where I want the logs to go. He unloads the logs and he takes them into the log store and stacks them all up for me. It's absolutely terrific. Especially if I'm not there, it means that nobody else has to worry about it, and I don't come home from work to a massive pile of logs in the drive that I've then got to go and put away. So I love it. I love the log man who comes and delivers to us. It took a little bit of finding, because he's just by word of mouth. You don't just ring him up and ask him for logs. You kind of have to be recommended. But when I saw him, what he said to me was really sort of alarmed me, is not the right word, but certainly surprised me. And I was amazed about how he dealt with it. Basically, what happened was a big log delivery company have moved into our area, or at least wanted to move into our area. And you can order online, you tell them what you want, they come and deliver it, and away you go. Now, what he told me was they had paid him a visit to come and talk to him about this, because my logman was causing 2 problems for the big company. And the problems with this, first of all, they told him he was too cheap. And he said, well, no, I think I'm priced appropriately for my market and for my customers. And they said, no, you're too cheap. We want to sell logs at £125 a delivery, and my log man only charges £75. He said, so you're driving down the price for everyone. So if we stick at our price, we're not going to make any profit. So my log man said, well, that's your responsibility to make your own profit. I'm not changing my prices. They're right for my customers, and I'm going to carry on using them. And then the next thing he told me really surprised me, because they told my log man he should stop stacking logs. And I said, what do you mean you should stop stacking logs? That's one of the great customer service issues that you fix. You have lots of elderly customers. You have lots of customers who are out at work, and coming back to find your stacking done is great, whether you're a kind of frail customer or whether you're fit and healthy. And he said, no, I was told that I should stop stacking logs, because as a company, they don't stack logs. They tip a load out of the back of a truck into a person's drive, and then they have to sort it out themselves. And what the guy said to him was, if you're stacking logs, then it's too time consuming and people will still come to you. And he said, well, I'm not going to change that. I'm going to carry on stacking my logs, and I'm going to carry on charging the rates that I do. And this person from the big company has been a real pain in the neck, and they've been calling him up and giving him a really hard time for not increasing his prices or reducing his customer service. And, you know, I was just staggered by that, really, because it's not just driving prices down, it's also driving customer service down. So what's that got to do with marketing our own businesses? Well, essentially it's this. What do you do which is better than the big boys about customer service? What is it that schools get from you that they couldn't get anywhere else? What is it that one of the big boys would be cross about you doing? What would they want to make you do away with to provide something that was similar to their service? I've spoken about this before on the podcast, but we're not national companies. We focus really closely on our specialist niche. And when we do that, we really begin to serve the clients, the schools that we want, that we value, and who value the expertise that we have. So just be like my logman. Don't be like a big name brand.
You're listening to Education Consultant Marketing.
Now, just to finish us off then, the third item is to do with the 5-step marketing plan. Do you remember that?
The 5-step marketing plan. Step 1. Create your WordPress website so that you can easily update. Step 2. Frequently add great content about your specialist area using text, video or audio. Step 3. Share your content using social media like Twitter and LinkedIn. Step 4. Grow your email list by offering special reports or briefings. Step 5. Keep in regular contact with your clients and potential clients.
So let's have a think about step 2 of that 5-step marketing plan. Step 2 is about filling your website with loads of content, loads of useful content, loads of stuff that's informative and helps people in your specialist niche. Well, whatever it is. My niche, as you know, is safeguarding. Yours might be teaching people about ADHD. It might be helping Key Stage 3 teachers teach mathematics in a more interesting way. Whatever it is, you need to be the first person, the first place that people will go to for that particular kind of information. And as well as that, you might also be geographically precise in your area. So, for example, I work in Norfolk, Suffolk, London, and the South East. And that's really important sometimes to make that clear. Now, when you're building content to go on your website, what sort of things are you looking for? Well, it basically falls into 4 categories. Text, just ordinary writing about stuff. Images. Sometimes these are images which are not to be found elsewhere. They might be, you might develop them into posters. You might provide PowerPoint slides that other people can use. You might use video, which is another relatively easy thing to set up, particularly if you've got an iPhone or something like that. You can just record the video straight and upload it straight away to YouTube or Vimeo, which I know a lot of people use. And then the 4th kind of content that you can use is audio, just like this podcast, or you could make it shorter and do sort of lots of little 1-minute pieces about it. And I know there are some people that do that really well in the modern foreign languages sort of niche in the MFL. Now, how are you going to build all that content together? Well, what you need to do essentially is to brainstorm all your ideas, put them together into an editorial calendar, and make sure that you keep a notebook. Once you've brainstormed them, your editorial calendar, all that means is sketching out a timescale over the year, preferably, but you might just do it term by term, and spread out the content so that you're not doing all of the same thing all at the same time, that you're spreading things out. I have an editorial calendar for this podcast, for example, so that I can make sure that there's a reasonable flow to the different topics that I talk about, and also make sure that they're not too repetitive and that we talk about other things as well. Keeping the notebooks is really important, because what happens is you suddenly think of things in the middle of the night, on the train, standing in the queue at Tesco's, or like me when I'm thinking about marketing in the education consultancy and training world. what I'm doing is often looking at places that are marketing and seeing how we can take things that we can learn from other industries and bring them into education and help us market our businesses. So keeping that notebook is really key. Now, what sort of text might you write about? Well, what you need to be thinking about is, who is your audience? Who are the people that you are writing your material for? Who is going to read your content? And the first things that should lead you to is into lots of questions. So, for example, for myself in safeguarding, all I did was write down all the different questions. What is safeguarding? What is child protection? What is neglect? What is physical abuse? And so on. I can think of those questions at a very basic level. Then there's another layer of questions. Why is it like this? Whatever it is. And I can give some in-depth commentary to what's going on. I can look at stories in the news and think, from my client's point of view, from my reader's point of view, why did a school behave like that? What was it about the systems in that school that allowed X to happen? So you're thinking about the questions that your audience would have at a basic level and at an advanced level. Another thing that's often important for us in education is providing a place for people to find statutory resources, the key pieces of information for your particular specialist area. The government website's quite good, but often it's quite difficult to find some things. So again, if you're presenting yourself as a significant specialist in a particular thing, then your website should have the latest content in that area. Other content that you might have addresses the biggest issues that your audience has. And for many of us in education, whether we like it or not, Ofsted is quite an important feature. So making sure that you've got content on your website about how Ofsted inspects your particular specialism is going to help your customers. You can also talk about case studies. What is it about a particular story that either you help them as a consultant or some approaches that you could suggest that would help people in that situation? So think about some case studies. The next group to think about are how-tos. So how to write a flowchart so that people understand how to make a child protection concern. How to make language cards, how to make some flashcards so that people remember the words on there. You know, have a think about all the different how-tos that you could teach other people who work in your specialist area. And then there's some really interesting text that you can write about what I call your why. Why do you do what you do? So I came, for example, into safeguarding through lots of different events that had happened in my professional career, along with the children and young people that I work with and their families. So some of my why really helps my customers understand how I know what I know and how I have the expertise to help them with that. The other area that we can use is video, and some really nice short videos. You'll have noticed the ones that are around on my website. I try to make them less than 2 minutes long because people's attention span is relatively short. So what I'm trying to make really is a 1-minute video with one single point in it. And again, you can do that really easily using your iPhone. The important thing to remember really is, if you can, to make sure you use an external microphone which will plug into the iPhone to improve the sound quality. One of those microphones is the Rode lavalier microphone, and that will just plug straight into your phone and enable your video to have a little bit more quality in terms of the audio. Then you can use something like iMovie on the iPad or even on the iPhone to very easily edit it, top and tail it. We talked about that in episode 4, didn't we? So if you want to go back and have another look at that, that's in educationconsultantmarketing.com/4. And the final thing just to say at this point is, as well as having those things, remember, video doesn't have to be you in front of the video camera. It can also be a set of PowerPoint slides which flow through over time with a voiceover from yourself, and you can add some music to that. Now remember, when you are using music either on your video or on any sort of audio, the music that I use, for example, is all royalty free. That means I can use it without any sort of copyright issues. I get my royalty-free music from 3 sources. I get them from danosongs.com. I get them from incompetech.com. And I also get stingers and things like that from Audio Jungle. So again, I'll put the 3 links into the show notes. So that's danosongs.com, incompetech.com, and audiojungle.net. I hope that's given you some really great ideas for getting content onto your website. The more content you have on your website, the more Google is able to find you. And Google is one of the most important ways that people will find your website and your expertise. So building the content on your website is really, really important.
You're listening to Education Consultant Marketing with Andrew Hall.
So that's all we've got time for today. I'd love to get your feedback on the topics that I've discussed. You can email me at andrew.hall@ecmhq.com, or you can use the contact form on the website. The show notes are at educationconsultantmarketing.com/6. And I'd really appreciate it if you went to iTunes to subscribe, rate and review, as that will help other consultants find the podcast more easily. The direct subscribe link is on the website. Otherwise, you can go to educationconsultantmarketing.com/podcast. You can also join me on Twitter at 5Step Marketing and add your comments there. I'm a great believer in public praise, private criticism, so your ideas on how I can make the podcast better are best sent by email. Until next time, remember to spend at least 2 hours over the next 7 days building your digital footprint and sharing great content with your specialist learning community. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your time. I've been Andrew Hall, and you have been a great listener.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Education Consultant Marketing. For more information, please visit the website. This was a Success in Schools production.